We've all heard the old adage that the best way to get someone to do something is to convince them that it's in their best interest. But that's not always how persuasion works, especially when you take into account some of the more nefarious ways that people can be manipulated into doing things they wouldn't otherwise do. It turns out there are quite a few ways to persuade someone to do something against their better judgment, from appealing to emotions to outright lying. So let's take a look at a couple of the common persuasion techniques that political leaders use to manipulate people into voting for them. And just to be clear, these aren't necessarily techniques that are only used by bad politicians. Sometimes even the most well-meaning leaders will fall back on these techniques when it seems like they have no other choice. We're just going to say right now that we aren't taking sides on any of this. Instead, we want to help you think critically about the rhetoric that politicians use when you vote. Now, if you've ever taken a social psychology class, you might have learned about a concept called the fundamental attribution error, which is basically the idea that we tend to overemphasize dispositional factors and oversimplify the reasons that people do what they do. What this means is that we often make the mistake of thinking that someone must just be a bad person because they did something that we don't agree with, rather than considering the multitude of situational factors that might have led them to make that decision. That said, there are still plenty of bad people out there who actively try to take advantage of others. So keep an eye out for the following 6 signs that a politician is trying to persuade you to vote for them by manipulating your emotions or your perceptions. Number 1. They activate love or hate. It's a fact of life that humans are more likely to do things for people that they like than for people that they don't like. In other words, we're more likely to do things for people that we feel love towards than for people that we feel hate towards. But that doesn't mean that politicians will always try to activate love or fondness when trying to persuade us to do what they want us to do. Because here's the thing. While we're generally more likely to do things for people we like, we're also more likely to do things to avoid hurting the feelings of people we don't like. To put it another way, if you really dislike someone, you might find yourself doing things to appease them or to avoid conflict, even if those things aren't in your best interest. So, depending on our relationship with a particular politician or political party, they may appeal to either our love or our hate when trying to persuade us to vote for them. Generally speaking, though, most politicians will try to activate love rather than hate, since we tend to trust people that we like more than people that we dislike. Number 2. They demonize or idealize the other side. It's easy to get swept up in the fervor of a political movement, especially when it feels like there's a lot at stake. But sometimes we need to take a step back and remember that the people on the other side of the political spectrum are just that, people. Just because someone has different political views than us doesn't mean that they're a bad person or that they're trying to take advantage of us. Unfortunately, though, that's the way that many politicians like to frame things. By painting the other side of the political spectrum as either evil or perfect, they can make themselves seem like the lesser of two evils, even if that's not actually the case. So if a politician is trying to persuade you to vote for them by demonizing or idealizing the other side, remember that they're probably doing it for one of 2 reasons. Either they're genuinely a bad person and they want to take advantage of you, or they're trying to make themselves look better by making the other side look worse. Number 3. They create heroes or villains. This technique is similar to the last one, but it's a little bit more nuanced. Essentially, it involves creating a narrative in which there are clear heroes and villains. The heroes in this story would be the people on your side of the political spectrum, and the villains would be the people on the other side. Once you've bought into this narrative, you're much more likely to see the world in black and white terms, which makes it easier for you to make decisions about who to support. Unfortunately, though, many politicians are perfectly happy to create false narratives in order to gain power. So be careful of any politician who tries to sell you on the idea that the world is divided into good and evil and that they're on the good side. No. 4. They use fear to get you to do what they want. Politicians aren't the only ones who know that fear is a powerful motivator. In general, we're more likely to do things to avoid negative outcomes than to achieve positive ones. That's why fear is such a common persuasion tool. Politicians who use fear to try to persuade you to vote for them will often try to do so by exaggerating the likelihood or severity of a negative outcome. For example, they might claim that if you don't vote for them, your taxes will go up or that the economy will collapse. Now, some of these claims might have a basis in reality, but oftentimes they're simply unfounded. Before you let fear get the best of you and cause you to vote for someone, make sure you take some time to evaluate the validity of their claims. Number 5. They distract you with red herrings. Red herring is a logical fallacy that involves drawing attention away from the real issue by focusing on an irrelevant one. For example, let's say that you're trying to decide whether or not to vote for a particular politician. You might start by considering their stance on the issues that are important to you. But if that politician is skilled at using red herrings, they might be able to distract you from the issues that matter and get you to focus on something that does not. For example, they might bring up a completely irrelevant piece of gossip about you and then try to make you feel guilty for whatever reason. Or they could try to appeal to your emotions by telling you a sad story about someone who was hurt by an issue that has nothing to do with the election. When a politician uses a red herring, they're essentially trying to change the subject and avoid talking about the things that you actually care about. If you find yourself getting distracted by a politician's red herrings, try to refocus your attention on the issues that matter. Remember, you're more likely to do things to avoid negative outcomes than to achieve positive ones. And number 6, they tell lies to benefit themselves. While it might seem obvious that lying is a bad thing, it's important to remember that not all lies are created equal. Some lies, like those told by a politician who is trying to cover up a serious crime, are clearly more harmful than others. But even the seemingly harmless white lies can be problematic if they're used to manipulate people into doing things that they wouldn't otherwise do. For example, let's say that you're undecided about who to vote for in the upcoming election. A politician who is desperate for your vote might try to lie to you in order to persuade you to vote for them. They might claim that they've always lived in your town, when in reality they just moved there a few months ago, or that they went to college when really they just took a few classes at a community college. Now, these lies might seem small and inconsequential, but they're actually quite harmful. That's because they erode trust between politicians and the people that they're supposed to be serving. When politicians are caught lying, even about small things, it makes it much harder for them to persuade people to believe them about anything, no matter how important it is. Now, this is a problem because trust is essential for a functional democracy. If the people can't trust their leaders, then the government won't work very well and the country could potentially descend into chaos. So, if a politician is trying to persuade you to vote for them by lying to you, consider that their behavior is not only dishonest but also anti-democratic. The bottom line is that there are all kinds of ways that people can be manipulated into voting for a particular candidate or party. By understanding some of the more common persuasion techniques that are used, we can better protect ourselves from being taken advantage of. So, before you cast your ballot this November, take a close look at the candidates and the issues, and make sure that you're voting for what you actually believe in, rather than being manipulated by slick rhetoric or fancy footwork. We hope you enjoyed this video and we appreciate your support. Please subscribe and leave a comment below to let us know what you thought. Thanks for watching.